Hi, it's Preston DeGuys from the NetWorker blog, and today what I want to do is take you through NetWorker dependency tracking, which is effectively a mechanism that NetWorker uses to protect your backups and ensure that you can recover data when you need to. So I'd be a little bit remiss if I didn't mention my book before I got started, Data Protection, Ensuring Data Availability. It's available on Amazon, CRC Press and many other online bookstores. You can get it in paperback or ebook or Kindle format. And where this is different from a backup and recovery book, such as the book that I published in 2008, is that we're seeing a very definite move in the industry away from having dedicated backup administrators to developing a more broad spectrum approach to data protection, where we effectively need data protection administrators within organizations. And data protection, ensuring data availability, is exactly the sort of book that you need to get if you want to understand how to be a data protection administrator within your organization. Now, that being said, let's get on to dependency tracking. So to explain this, we'll use an example of a typical weekly backup. And a typical weekly backup is one where we do a full backup once a week and incrementals for the rest of the week. So it might be something like this, where on the Saturday evening we do a full backup and the rest of the time we're doing incremental backups. Now, for the example that we're going to use here, we'll assume that backups are being retained for 6 weeks. So what that means is if we're doing 6-week retention, then we build up 6 weeks worth of this sort of backup, where we've got a full on each Saturday and incrementals each other day of the week. So what does that mean from a retention point of view? So if we're doing a full backup once a week and incrementals for the rest of the week and retaining those backups for 6 weeks, so we know that there's 7 days in a week and we're doing 6 weeks retention, so that should mean, in theory, that we have 42 days retention on our backups. And the answer is yes, we do. But as to when NetWorker will remove those old backups once they hit 42 days old, it's a slightly different question. So do we have 42 days retention? Well, as one of my colleagues likes to say from time to time, it depends. So let's understand NetWorker dependency tracking a little bit more. Now, we know every time we do a backup with NetWorker, we generate one or more save sets depending on what we're actually backing up. Dependency tracking is there to make sure that all the data that you need to execute a complete recovery of whatever you've been backing up is there right through to the end of the retention period that you specify. So that means we only purge expired data when it actually meets 2 conditions, not 1. The first condition is obvious, it has to be outside the retention period. The second condition is to do with the dependencies. We need to make sure that there are no save sets that are still inside the retention period specified that depend on the save set which is now outside its retention time. If there are save sets that are inside the retention period that depend on that save set, the save set can't be purged. And that becomes really important when we're doing a mix of fulls and incrementals or fulls, incremental and differential backups. Now, what this effectively means is that we build up what we would refer to as dependency chains. And you can sort of think of a dependency chain as a sequence of backups where each backup depends on a previous backup in the chain. You can say that the incremental backup that we do after that first full depends on the full, and then the next incremental that you do depends on the incremental that was done before it, which in turn, of course, depends on the full that was done before that, and that goes on and on. It's sort of like NetWorker's version of there was an old lady that swallowed a fly. So let's look at what dependency tracking then does for us. So we've got this sequence of backups that we've done based on our 6-week retention period, our 42-day retention period. And in this scenario, we're looking at a dependency chain where the full backup is outside the retention window, but the incremental backups that depend on the full backup are still within the retention window. So that means NetWorker won't delete that full backup. In fact, NetWorker won't delete the full backup when the first incremental goes outside the retention window, because there are still incrementals within the retention window that require those backups in order to be deleted, in order to be recovered. So what this means is that we effectively only delete backups
in terms of retention period when an entire dependency chain can be deleted. So in this case, we've moved on effectively another week, and we now have a broken chain. We have a chain that's been split by the next full backup that's been done, which means we have a sequence of backups, 4 plus 6 incrementals, which all exist outside the retention window, and there is nothing inside the retention window that requires those backups to be available in order to do a complete recovery. So NetWorker can delete all 7 backups simultaneously. So what happens in a scenario where a full backup fails? So in this case, we've got an example on screen where we've got a prior dependency chain, a full backup that was scheduled to happen didn't happen for some reason, it failed, and it wasn't rerun. What that means is that the incrementals that would have followed that failed full, instead of chaining on to a failed full, which is unrecoverable, chain on to the previous dependency chain. So it actually grows the dependency chain further. And effectively, what that means is we can then only remove the save sets when all of the save sets in that chain have actually become expired. The same as before, it's just we've extended the length of the chain because there was a failed full. Some people ask, are there scenarios where NetWorker doesn't use dependency tracking? And in reality, it actually uses dependency tracking for all backups that you do. There are some perceived exceptions, but those exceptions aren't really exceptions. So if you look at vProxy and VBA backups before it, for instance, they're considered to be a full backup every day because of the way that we write the backups. Each new full backup starts a new dependency chain. It's just we've only got a dependency chain of 1, and that's why those backups can be expired pretty much as soon as they hit their retention time, because from a NetWorker perspective, there is no dependencies that need to be considered there. So thanks for watching. That was understanding dependency tracking. I hope that was useful for you, and I hope it lets you understand how NetWorker protects your backups very carefully. Thank you.